Garry Kasparov is one of the greatest chess players of all time. And in this video, Garry comes out of retirement to shock Hikaru Nakamura with his signature move in the Nimzo Indian defense. Now, in the game, Garry Kasparov is playing as white. He opens 1d4, and he heads for the Nimzo Indian defense with c4, e6, knight c3, bishop b4. Of course, the move bishop b4 is the key move of the Nimzo. Black is pinning white's knight on c3 and preventing e4. And now from here, white has several different options, but in the game, Garry goes for the classical variation with the move queen to c2. So let's see what Garry had in mind for this game. Here, Hikaru, he castles, logical move. White goes a3, challenging the bishop on b4. And now black takes, white recaptures with the bishop. White now has the bishop pair, which is great, but black does have a lead in development. And with that in mind, black immediately strikes in the center with the move d5. So far, this is very, very standard stuff. Now, Garry Kasparov plays the most natural move, knight f3. And here, Hikaru, he takes on c4. White recaptures with the bishop. And now Hikaru goes b6. This is the best move here. Black's idea is to go bishop b7 or bishop a6 next and probably follow up with c5, striking on the queen side. And if you made it this far, you're about to be rewarded. This is where Garry Kasparov unleashes his signature move that left Hikaru completely shocked. Here on move 9, Garry launches the kingside attack with the move h4. Oh boy, it's going to be an exciting game. White's idea is simple. He wants to go h5 and maybe even h6, starting a kingside attack and forcing out some weakening moves from black. I mean, this is just nuts. The king is going to be stuck in the center. Black's already castled the lead in development, but white going for the attack. Now here on move 9, Hikaru already feeling the pressure. He decides to strike on the queen side with the move c5. Now this is a pawn sacrifice. If white recaptures on c5, which Garry does, d takes c5. Here Hikaru has to recapture on c5, immediately sacrificing the pawn, or just ignore it, going bishop b7 and allowing the move c takes b6. Now here the best move is actually bishop b7, allowing white to capture on b6, then black recaptures, and here black would have tremendous compensation for the sacrificed pawn. However, that's not what happened in the game. Hikaru feeling a little bit rattled. Instead of bishop b7, here he immediately recaptures on the c5 square, b takes c5. Oh boy, this is a big mistake. This closes the c-file, and this gives Garry Kasparov the time he needs to push forward with his attack. And yes, he goes for it with h5. Oh boy, here Hikaru has a big decision. Do you develop bishop b7 or bishop a6, or do you immediately stop the h-pawn with the move h6? Now, in the game, Hikaru decides to stop the advance of the h-pawn. He plays h6. However, this is a dubious move, and here Garry Kasparov, he continues with his absolutely brilliant idea, and he goes for it with the move g4. Oh my goodness. Now, this is not a pawn sacrifice. That pawn is defended by the queen. However, I'm giving it 2 exclamation points for style points. Garry, his idea, he just wants to go g5, blow open the king side, and if that h6 pawn is removed, maybe he'll go h6 himself. Now, from here, Hikaru, he's feeling the pressure. He goes queen to d5. He wants those queens off the board. However, real fast, I want to show you part of Garry's attacking idea. Here, if Hikaru went bishop b7 instead of queen d5, bishop b7 on the board, then Garry would go h5, and after h takes g5, the strongest move here is actually h6. Oh my goodness, the h-file getting blown open, the rook being activated. This would be absolutely insane. So Hikaru, his spidey senses were tingling. Instead of allowing that, he immediately goes queen d5, trying to put an end to the madness. However, if Hikaru thought the attack was over, he thought wrong. Here, Garry Kasparov, demonstrating his experience, he takes the queen on d5. Now, the best move is e takes d5, accepting those hanging pawns on the c5 and d5 squares. However, Hikaru not in the best shape in this game. He takes back with the knight. Hikaru feeling rattled by Garry Kasparov's h-pawn attack. And here, Garry, he just keeps going. g5. Oh my goodness, the ideas after h takes, g takes. Suddenly, white has ideas based on h6. His pieces are so active. And here, Hikaru goes f6, trying to blunt the bishop, but Garry doesn't mind. He just retreats bishop d2. And now, of course, that bishop blocks all of the advanced squares of the knight, and knight is going nowhere. Now, knight c6 from Hikaru, trying to get his pieces into the game, but rook c1 from Garry, targeting that weak pawn on the c5 square. Garry is not slowing down one bit. Now, from here, Hikaru, he plays a desperation move. That is knight to d4. And of course, this is a pawn sacrifice. You do not take on d4 first. Instead, you simply play rook takes c5. Black loses the pawn. Now, of course, Hikaru takes the knight on f3. Knight takes, e takes, and Garry Kasparov does have those doubled pawns on the f file. However, beyond that, he's up a clean pawn. He has the bishop pair. The king is actually doing pretty well on e1. It's a little bit closer to the center of the board. And overall, Garry, he is dominating. His opening plan worked to perfection. Of course, Hikaru is a fantastic defender. He starts bishop d7 trying to hang in there. And now Garry showing his flair. Rook to h4. Oh my goodness, the rook being activated on the 4th rank. What a brilliant idea. Now Hikaru rook fb8 trying to target b2, but Garry, he says no problem, b4. He just pushes that pawn majority on the queen side, and he's looking good. Now Hikaru a6, perhaps trying to control the b5 square, and Garry brings in the other rook to the d4 square. Again, Garry just dominating so far. Now, bishop b5 from Hikaru, starting to reorganize. Perhaps he wants to get rid of white's bishop pair, but Garry declines. Bishop g2, keeping the bishops on the board. Of course, those bishops are just monsters in the endgame. According to Larry Kaufman, a big computer specialist for chess, the bishop pair is typically worth about half a pawn, and that is definitely true in an open position like this. Now, Hikaru rook e8 trying to reorganize, and both sides just repositioning their pieces. And from here, both sides make some more shuffling moves, and eventually in this position, Garry finally wins another pawn. Bishop takes d5. This starts the exchange. Then e takes, rook takes, rook takes, rook takes. And here, Garry Kasparov is up 2 clean pawns. He has 5 pawns versus the 3 of Hikaru. Oh no. Now Hikaru decides to get rid of the rooks. I'm not so sure about that move. Typically, the rooks are a benefit to the defending side in the endgame. So in this position, Hikaru does have drawing chances based on white's weak pawns on the king side. Perhaps his king can try to clean up, but he's going to have to be so careful. Now Garry, his idea, king e3. He wants to bring the king over to the queen side on these dark squares and win that pawn on a6. So let's see what happens. Hikaru g6 trying to get counterplay, but Garry says no thanks. He goes h6. He wants to keep that dark square blockade on the g5 square. Wow, what a concept. Now Hikaru takes. Garry goes forward to the d4 square, and here Hikaru has a very big decision to make. Where do you go with the king? Now, the best move is actually retreating king g7. You want to bring your king back over to the center of the board. However, in the game, Hikaru misses that. He goes king to h5. He is effectively all in with the king. There is simply no way to get the king over to the queen side to defend. And this turns out to be a fatal mistake. Garry brings his king over to the b6 square. He's going to win the pawn. And while, yes, Hikaru does win the pawn on f2 in many lines, Garry has that blockade on the dark squares here. He wins this pawn, and there is simply nothing stopping these 2 queenside pawns from promoting. And from here, Garry Kasparov just shows his signature endgame technique and cinches the victory on move 44. Hikaru Nakamura resigns to Garry Kasparov, a legend in chess and one of the greatest chess players of all time. Wow, what a game. Now, if you enjoyed this video, check out my Hikaru Nakamura playlist, and I will see you in the next video.